Hello, I'm Rob, welcome to the channel, and today we are going to be painting Ultramarines. So really exciting tutorial today. We're going to be painting an Ultramarines tank with very few colours. So we're going to start from a grey primer and then we're going to use our matte white from Army Painter, mix in with a little bit of airbrush thinner just to get it to go through the airbrush easier. The reason I'm using grey instead of black, as I usually do, is because I don't want the contrast to be too heavy on this tank, and I still want to maintain some punch with the colour. And my worry was that if I did it on a black primer, it wouldn't be as punchy as I would want it to be. So this is a way to be able to create some contrast on the tank, but also maintain that luster of that blue, because I think often with the Ultramarines they can be a little bit boring. The typical Ultramarine blue, rather than the Games Workshop Ultramarines, the actual colour, the paint, is quite boring. So we're going to use some magic blue today. So a really kind of quite exciting blue, quite far away from kind of again a standard Ultramarines blue, which I find a little bit boring. And this blue we're just going to put all over that pre-highlight that we've created. Now this probably took around 3 thin coats to get a good layer all over the tank. And when you do the first layer, leave it to dry, come back to it. It's good that you do it in parts like this, because you can just move on to the next part, move on to the next part. As you're doing the tank, and as you can see, the more layers that you put on a particular area, the darker it becomes as well. So that's something that we'll come back to in a moment. But you can see me here just going through all of the kind of the elements. I'd really recommend doing the exhausts that sit on the side of the Rhino. Leave them off. They'll be easier for airbrushing a little bit later. The tank, though, it's up to you how dark you want it to be, and that will be determined by how many coats of that speed paint you put on. I get a lot of questions about the speed paints. The speed paints, this is just straight through the airbrush. I haven't used any thinner at all. And then another question I get asked is about reactivation. I've never had any issues with reactivation, the way that I apply them through the airbrush. So you can see a bit of a jump here. I've done a couple of thin coats, and what you can see here as well is just me laying down some extra layers of that magic blue, just in the parts that I want to be the darkest. So the top of the tank in particular. And the more layers we put down, the darker it will become. So that will be something to consider if you're doing an army in stages rather than in one go. To be able to maintain that blue, you need to be really, really careful about how many layers that you put down, and how heavily you go into the shadows. So we're going to use a mixture of grim black and magic blue. I used 2 parts magic blue to 1 part grim black here, and I just wanted to up the contrast a little bit, because I was aware that particularly with blue colours, often contrasts get lost once we start to gloss it, we matte it, add oils as well. And what you can see here is just me shading it with that grim black and magic blue mix. And I also use this to shade the white very, very gently. Now I have thinned this with a bit of airbrush thinner, just to make sure it's a very, very fine glaze. But it does work. That grim black magic blue mix does work really nicely as a shade for blue on the Ultramarines. You could use a grey if you wanted, but I just really like the way that the white and the blue looks together. So that's why I decided to do this. But a great combination. You can see here just a quick jump in time. I've just simply base coated the metallics. Nothing fancy. I just did a simple gold, and the silvers was Night Scale Silver by Army Painter. And then we'll apply our oils over the top of that a little bit later. But I've glossed everything using Army Painter's gloss varnish. Really decent gloss varnish this, but make sure you get a couple of coats of gloss varnish, because we don't want to damage the paint job underneath when we start applying oils. So now that our our gloss varnish is down and everything's protected, we can then start to add our transfers. Now you can't put transfers down without that gloss varnish. It allows the transfer to settle really nicely over the model, and if you are struggling with transfers and you're not using a gloss varnish, that's probably the reason why. We use micro sol and micro set. Micro set is number 1, so I use that one first, and then I lay the transfer over that, and then you can see me with a cotton wool bud here, dipped in some micro sol, just pushing out all the air bubbles, and just gently rolling it over the transfer to make it nice and smooth. Now that probably needs about an hour to set. And then we need to weather these transfers, because we are going to weather our tank later, but we need to create the appearance that it's painted on. So we want to create some scratches. So I've used a blue colour and a white colour here. So this is just, you can see me with the sponge with the blue colour. With a sponge creating some scratches. I'll dot it on, I'll dab it on, I'll create scratches just like that, and that really helps to sell the effect that it is painted on. And then I've glossed it again. I've glossed everything again just to protect those transfers underneath, because I'm going to use oils mixed with white spirits in a moment, and that will the gloss varnish over the top of those transfers will now protect everything. So this is good to go. It's had a double gloss varnish in total, and you can see here the dozer blade. I've done a fair few scratches, and I've also used just dark brown, oak brown mixed with a little bit of black, just to weather up the tank. I've done lots of things about weathering in previous videos. You can go back to the Iron Warriors Dreadnought tutorial to go see how I go about doing that. And then we just use oils. Now, if you've not used oils before, they're really straightforward. As long as you've got a gloss varnish, be it a rattle can gloss varnish or through an airbrush, and then you can use a matte varnish, either rattle can or through an airbrush, you can do oils basically. So this is just mixed with white spirit, Winsor & Newton oils. I've used 2 parts burnt umber to 1 part black. I think on reflection I should have just used burnt umber, and that probably would have fitted in a little bit better with my my Ultramarines army that I do have, but I actually just forgot the combination of oils. So yeah, my recommendation would just be burnt umber. Once that's all dry and once that's all tidied up, you can then move on to your streaks. So you can see here I've done the whole process so you can see this, because I often get lots of questions about streaking. So I'm using just burnt umber here rather than actual rust streaks. So it's better to see this as more grime and a mixture of rust than just rust. If you want something more rusty, then you could use raw sienna or burnt sienna. But I've gone for more the idea that it's grime. And you can see that I'm placing with the brush very carefully some neat burnt umber in particular places, particularly at the top. And I've dipped a fan brush, which you can get from most artist stores. I've dipped that in white spirit, and what you can see me doing is very gently dragging this brush down to create some natural streaking. And I've shown this on the Leviathan video before, so if you want to know more about it, you can see that video. But I thought I'd slow it down for you for this one. But this is a great panel to do, or a great area to do rust streaks on, particularly on white, because it looks so stark against that white. And then what you can see here is me just wicking away the pure oil just from the top of the scratch, because we want the oils to come from the scratch, not from above it. So you can just see me wicking it away, so it's neater essentially and looks more realistic. And then I've done the oils on the whole tank, and then I've done streaks on other places on the tank as well, because we need it to match the front of the dozer blade. And then I've given it a matte varnish, and then this is what it looks like so far. So we haven't got the exhausts on it just yet. We'll do those in a moment. But this is with a matte varnish, Army Painter matte varnish. It's got a nice sheen to it. And we're going to use dark wood and purple swarm for our exhausts. And then I'm just simply hitting the dark wood over the top of our exhaust. Now I have given the metallics a dry brush all over as well after I've given it a matte spray. And then we're going to go in with that purple speed paint just at the top, so we can see a little bit brown at the bottom. And then this is our final tank. So a super quick tutorial, just outlining some of the basics. I always think it's tough with Ultramarines to be able to get lots of contrast, but also quite an exciting and vivid blue while using few paints. But hopefully, just with a magic blue, we've been able to achieve that today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been useful for you, and I hope to see you on the next one. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Take care, guys.